if you've actually built something that might be of worth to somebody, you need to get into the largest market as fast as you can. Get in market, boots on the ground, go as fast as you can.
Hello, my name is Bella. I'm the host of Beyond Now, and today I'm sitting here with Stephen Baxter, the founder and lead investor of Beaten Zone Venture Partners. Steve, I'm really, really honored to be sitting next to you. I have prepared for this interview for a whole week.
Oh, wow.
I'm very anxious, but I'll try my best.
No, thank you very much. Thanks for having me, and that was lovely. But I'm easy. It's all good.
We're going to start with a bit tough topic. I know that the last 2-3 years have been, I would say, like unstable for the world in condition. And how has this change made you think differently about investing in defense technology?
Well, it's probably because the world's been unstable for the last few years that I've been thinking about it, to be honest. So we have for a while now, probably for a best part of a decade, been slowly de-globalizing as a world. It's accelerated lately, I suppose, with the new administration in the US. COVID didn't assist in that whole situation as well, where times of sort of global emergency, everyone looked after themselves, and it was at a it sort of began there, and then in 2022 there's obviously the terrible situation of the war in Ukraine and Europe. So nothing's feeling that good at this point in time. Just feels like every few decades, every 50, 60, 70 years, we go a little bit insane as a species and start fighting each other. I hope it's not true. There's also been in the last 20 years historic underspending in defence in the West. The Cold War ended. There was a bit of a peace dividend that was extracted. But now the holiday from history is over, and we've got to sort of pick up our collective strengths again and rearm, essentially.
As you mentioned, for the last 20 years, money spent on defense technology wasn't very well used. Why do you think that is?
Not very well used. Well, there wasn't much of it to use. So there's two factors. It was very much reduced.
But why do you think it's now a very good idea to invest in defense technology? And what kind of new ideas or technologies are now making defense spending much more smarter and efficient? Yeah,
well, it's a good idea now, I suppose. There's an increase in defence budgets. So if we look at from the Australian perspective, the Allied addressable market, there's roughly 50 countries out there that we can sell to without having legal problems, you might say. That's a $1.7 trillion US market. So the Australian defence budget is $35 billion US dollars. So it's massively different. So we need to look, I suppose, long and hard at that. And those defence budgets as well, that's are currently roughly at 2% spending versus GDP. The world's rapidly going to 3.5% to 5% spending. The US is going to 5%, NATO's going to 5%, and they're the two biggest players. So we're talking about $2.5 to $3 trillion worth of spending per year in the next 5 to 10 years. So massive market. There's also a change in the format and the style of items and articles that soldiers, sailors, and airmen use, so the weapons and the systems that they use. This is best exemplified by drones, for example, in Ukraine. We're seeing drones in, not just Ukraine, but also in the Indo-Pakistani unfortunate little skirmish that recently occurred. Definitely seeing this in the Middle East as well. You're seeing a prevalence of quite inexpensive, quite numerous platforms change how doctrine's deployed by militaries. And as a result, the Western worlds haven't caught up, and we have to change out our armaments and our systems to match this. So that's an opportunity for investors. So you're basically seeing the commoditised world of the internet being driven down into the combat space. And as a result, it means there's a lot of new things have to be purchased. There's a lot of innovation. Innovation cycles are increasing in speed all of the time. And in general, that's actually really good. So,
talking about the innovation and the drones, how are these quick innovations affecting the big traditional defense companies? Like, I'm thinking, are we now, seeing military technology being produced, developed by regular companies, or is it vice versa?
So, I'll answer your question by talking about something amazing that's come to the fore, I suppose, in the last sort of 3 to 6 weeks. Mm-hmm. It's out of the Ukrainian war. It's a Ukrainian government initiative called Brave One. That's Brave number 1. And they have a marketplace. So Ukrainian fighting units can go into a web browser, onto this marketplace and they can order drones or systems. Western companies can go on that marketplace and offer to sell those drones and systems. So literally you actually have a marketplace to accelerate the adoption of cutting-edge military technologies. So everything that comes with the marketplace comes with that. There's a rating system. So if that thing that the Ukrainian unit has purchased doesn't work very well, they get a 1-star rating. Nobody wants a 1-star rating. So there's other elements to that where there's feedback is provided as well. So there's this really tight now. So you have the users being the poor people in on the front line, and there's a saying that there's no one's as innovative as a soldier being shot at. They tend to get pretty innovative pretty fast. So you have this amazing solution where the people closest to the combat can go to the suppliers of the most cutting edge technology, can buy some of it, use it, test it, give feedback, and that will improve that process along the way. That's happening it's happening in weeks. To give you some idea, Western nations are still putting out tenders measured in years. So that's all changing. It has to change, and that's part of the opportunity for defence as well. So the Brave One website, there would be it's like Amazon Web Services for things you use in a war. Unfortunate, but it's definitely an illustration of how not just the goods we use, but how you acquire the goods, how you actually improve on those goods they're used at the same time.
Talking about supplying the goods, what are the biggest problems Australian startups still face when trying to reach this massive international market, and what is the best solution to actually overcome these challenges?
Look, I think Australian defence startups face very similar problems to regular startups, and that it's starting. Just get out there and start. So, at the very early end, if you've actually built something that might be of worth to somebody, you need to get into the largest market as fast as you can. Over the years, I've seen a large hesitancy in traditional software-based startups going into having a physical presence in the US, because if you're on the internet, you can sell anywhere in the world, but typically you need boots on the ground. Mm-hmm. So very much so in defence. You need boots on the ground. You need to be in front of the customer. So there's that hesitancy there, I suppose. And I'm always quite flagrant. I say just go and do it. And I have a theory about startups entering the US. You don't plan it, you do it, which might sound crazy as an investor using my capital, but because no matter how long you plan it, the first time you'll get it wrong. Then you'll do it a second time, and you won't get it quite as wrong. And the third time you'll probably get it right. So if you spend 6 months planning, the first one's always going to fail. You've wasted 6 months.
Even after that plan.
Learn in market, because time is far more important. If that 6 months you spend planning, a competitor could get a head start on you. So get in the market and plan. You're going to fail. That's fine. It's okay. You're not failing, you're learning. So and obviously that takes resources, and that's where investors can potentially come in as well. So get in market, boots on the ground, go as fast as you can.
I've seen one of the presentations you made earlier, and I've noticed that you've been calling the defense tech an unloved investment because of the concerns of ESG and everything.
Yep.
How do you talk to investors who worry about these things?
Well, it's not just ESG. ESG is one of three things that I point out. There's a perception that the defence customer, there's only one defence customer in Australia, and that's the Australian Defence Force. There's 50 countries out there. They've all got a defence force. You can all sell it to them. There's roughly 200 organisations inside the US Defence Force that can purchase. So go find one of those instead. So there's not just one customer. In defence, a lot of the products are hardware products, and hardware is harder to make money from. So there's a very real concern there about returns, and that's you have to be very have a really good visibility of how your portfolio is constructed in order to minimise that. And then there's ESG, and ESG is just terrible. Literally, we are talking about investing in companies that defend the realm, that defend the entire framework in society that makes ESG possible. So I think ESG is a very first world, wonderful, aspirational thing to be able to do, but it's only possible in a Western robust democracy, and that's guarded by men with guns. And at some point, who provides that? So we need to get a bit realistic on where our wealth comes from and what supports our society.
But your fund is one of the first in the area, and what do you think the benefits are to be the first?
Yeah, so we're definitely. I mean, there's a whole bunch of angel investors out there who do this. So we're not the first defence investor by any stretch. We're the first one who specifically go after the defence asset class. So we don't talk in terms of dual use. So for your listeners who might understand what dual use is a category of investment where, like a helicopter, for example, you can use it as a life-saving device or a life-taking device. It's a dual use technology. What we focus on is material military application. We think that our thesis is that things that have material military application are unloved by investors because of those ESG issues primarily. And as a result, where there's less investors, the equity is cheaper price. So we think there's a buy-side equation to that. Most things in this space devolve to dual use over time. So they start out to be quite exquisite and a little bit expensive. And then as the military or the government customers buy more, the price of manufacture comes down and more people can afford it. So we sort of think that whilst there's dual use applications, that they're not in a dual use market until the dual use market can afford it. So we look at things where we're entering a period of uncertainty. Defence budgets are probably doubling, if not doubling in a half. The defence goods we look at are the things that arm and assist soldiers, sailors and airmen to do their ultimate job. And we're about to need a lot of them. So there's a big market there.
So you also invest against the trend when things are rough for most tech startups. And how does this strategy help Beaten Zone make the most of market situation?
Invest against the trend. Oh God, you never want to. So my other business, 1013, we made the decision during the downturn post 2021 to continue to be an all-round investor. Mm-hmm. So that's hard. Obviously everyone's taking flight, and the market conditions aren't conducive, and everyone's a bit concerned about the return of capital. So it's not easy to do that. So far as Beaten Zone, I've been doing Beaten Zone since late 2022. So I haven't really, and the market's only been up, unfortunately. It is the one business I've started that I hope I'm 100% wrong and it fails. It means the world will be at peace and there won't be any conflict. It's not going to be the case, right? I wish that was the case. We thoroughly believe in peace through strength. We think a strong Australia, strong Western nations will ultimately keep all of our kids out of compulsory military service. I have 3 daughters. The last thing I want to do is actually see them be forced to wear a uniform as opposed to maybe volunteer. But I think we have more peaceful societies when they have inherent strength.
Do you have some maybe examples you're seeing where defense technology is also being used in everyday life as well?
Oh yeah, very many. So our second investment's a business called Arceus Solutions, Arceus Systems. They have a hyperspectral system. They have a very, very capable sensor. It's about the size of a water jug, I suppose. It sees in at least 19 different non-visible spectrums. So I think have you ever seen the TV movie The Predator? He's got all those different infrared vision and he can see in the dark and see through mud. It's that sort of camera. It's been shrunken down in order to make it more applicable to smaller platforms, drones essentially, for example. But right now it's really, really expensive. But it's got an enormous capability about finding lost swimmers in the ocean, for example. But right now, surf lifesavers can't afford it. So when that comes down in price, that's a good example of it being able to apply what it can do in that more dual use sense. It's also very good at bushfire and seeing through smoke of bushfires and other bits and pieces as well. So it's got a lot of capability. But right now, it's only the military who can afford it because it's just so darned expensive.
You also invest in different areas like sea, air, land, space, and also in cyber. Which one do you think, from beyond now, would be the best hidden opportunity to grow?
Right. So, there's 5 domains in defence: sea, air, land, space, and cyber. And then the verticals there are hardware and software. So that's how we think about that investment universe. We've found 387 companies in Australia that touch our mandate in around those domains and profiles. We are seeing a lot in space. And I have to admit, I love space. Space is very well named. So something called low Earth orbit. So there's an orbit that most satellites, where the Starlink satellites live, it's called low Earth orbit. It's about 300 kilometres to 500 kilometres above the Earth's surface. In that one little 200 kilometre band, there's 192 billion cubic kilometres of space. So I think space is well named. I often get asked by people, oh, there's that many objects up there, will they crash into each other? I'm like, 192 billion cubic kilometres. No, I think we're pretty safe. So there's a lot of room. So I love as an investor and a bit of a technologist, I love that because there's so much room to do things in. So there's like a blank canvas. Not with that space and that volume comes bandwidth sensitivity, comes bandwidth separation and other bits and pieces. So, and when you're 300 kilometers above and you're like being on a hill 300 kilometers high and you can look down and see so many things. Space is truly revolutionary. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And finally, for someone new to investing in defense technology, what's the single most important piece of advice you would give to understand and navigate this complex area?
I think anyone starting at any investment area is always start slow. When I started my investment journey back in 2010, I thought I started slow. I wish I'd started slower. So, luckily I didn't make too many bad mistakes. We all make mistakes. That's how you learn. So, look, start slow. And I think fundamentally understand those 5 domains, CL, land, space, cyber, then hardware, software, and then in defense, there's no such thing as build it and they will come. It doesn't happen. You need to find, it's a government contract you need to get ultimately. You need to find the government user who wants that thing or wants that capability. They don't say, I want that camera. They say, I want something that can record film, for example, right? So you have to look for the government user who's got the budget, then the government operator, the defence force who's going to actually buy it and acquire it and how they do that. So there's a structured way through. Now you can, when I first started this process, I thought there was a rule book or a guidebook to entering the US defense market, for example. I now know it's a 3-dimensional matrix. Yet, however, you can see the path through. If you try and bulldoze your way through, you won't get through. You have to walk the path to get through, and you'll get to the end. So understand there's no such thing as build it and they will come. Find the demand, find the users, find the startup, do the investment, join them together.
Thank you again, Steve, for accepting my invitation.
It was awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers.